Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. So excited for this video as we're going to deep dive into the Washington Wizards with a trade guide here for the 2023-2024 NBA season. The trade deadline is fast approaching. We're actually less than a month away from the NBA trade deadline, which means these trade guides are going to become more and more frequent. We're going to have a ton of trade guide content coming out very soon on the channel, and if you're a Washington Wizards fan, you're going to want to leave a like and subscribe on today's video, because we're going to cover the Wizards a lot more in some future videos. We're going to be looking at some potential trades other teams could make with the Washington Wizards. I think they're a fascinating team to keep our eyes on, not only this trade deadline, but over the next couple of years, as I think there's going to be a lot of activity within this organization. We're going to break it all down more in this video. So again, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more if you enjoy the content here at Utility Sports. And I do just want to urge everyone to go give us follows on social media. Yes, I'm talking about Instagram and Twitter. Go give us follows over there, and also go join the Discord. Links are in the description for all three of those things. My personal Twitter's in there, the Utility Sports Twitter, the Utility Sports Discord server, where everyone's in there talking about basketball, trade ideas, mock drafts, everything is in that Discord. Daily pick'em. It's a fun community to be a part of. We'd love to see you in there. I myself am in there, so it's a great time to enjoy some basketball conversation with people who care about it just as much as you do. And then also go follow us over on Instagram as well. And let's get into it now with the video preview. What are we talking about in today's video? First, we're going to start with the Wizards' future draft assets. That's a great place to start in all of these trade guides because it gives us a good context on what this team has to work with, whether they're buyers, sellers, maybe they're in a retool, rebuilding mode. We have to look at what they currently have, as it kind of goes a long way in fueling some of their decisions each and every day, each and every year, and I think the Wizards are a good example of that. We'll look at the current franchise context and their direction. How good are they? Kind of disclaimer here, they're not very good. That's okay, but we'll talk about the direction that they're headed and why I think they're actually in a great spot moving forward. We'll look at the multi-year contract outlook. We're going to break down some expiring contracts. We're also going to look at some guys who are on multi-year deals and how that's going to impact the Wizards moving forward. We'll look at some potential trade pieces, guys I could see the Wizards moving, and what they could really net for those players as well. We have some kind of rough estimates, not necessarily trade packages in this video, but rough estimates for what the Wizards could roughly get on the trade market this year. We're also going to look at some buy low targets, and this is an interesting dilemma to talk about with the Wizards. Everyone's going to, of course, paint them as sellers. That does make a good deal of sense, but maybe, just maybe, they get involved in a way where there's a three-team deal going down and the Wizards scoop a player out of a deal like that they think could be a good long-term part of their future. It's going to be an interesting thing to discuss, and I'm excited for it toward the end of the video. And then finally, we're going to conclude the video with my final predictions. What do I expect the Wizards to do? What's the activity level going to look like? All of that and more. So let's get into it now. Thanks everyone for bearing with me. And here we are now finally with those Wizards draft assets. They technically owe their own first-round pick to the New York Knicks. That pick has been traded a couple of times, but luckily for Washington, that pick is top 12 protected this draft, so it definitely will not convey, barring anything crazy happening. And then it's also top 10 protected in 25 and top 8 protected in 2026. We're going to talk about that a little bit more going forward, but just kind of my early guess off of how they've been playing this year and kind of the long-term direction of this franchise. They're probably going to keep that selection, and they're not going to have to worry about it. It does convey to 2 second-round picks, not a super big deal. They also have 2024, 2026, and 2030 swap options with the Phoenix Suns, and that's a great thing to have. Getting that from the Bradley Beal trade was a huge home run for the Wizards. They had ultimately zero leverage, given the fact that Beal had a no trade clause, and they were still able to extrapolate some pretty good value, in my opinion. Now that 2024 pick swap is pretty much useless, the Suns are going to have a better record than the Wizards. The Wizards will not swap that, of course. But 2026, you never really know what's going to happen with Phoenix. And by 2030, no one has any clue where anyone's going to be in the NBA. So because of that, that might be a premium asset for Washington as they look to probably be a good team by then. We would have to guess 2030, maybe they'll have a top pick as well. Own Warriors 2030 first round pick that is top 20 protected. That comes from the Chris Paul Jordan Poole swap. Another example of extrapolating value from the Suns. They were able to turn Chris Paul into a second rounder, a protected first rounder, and Jordan Poole. We'll talk about him a little bit later in this video. And we'll also dive into some of their own second round picks. that they have possession of, including 3 total second rounders in 2026, 5 total in 2027. And you might say, well, those are only second round picks. And for most teams, I don't mention that. But for Washington, with where they're at, every single stab in the draft that they have might be really valuable to them. And it also gives them trade flexibility, which is something important. We're going to discuss that later on in this video as well. And I think that's why I wanted to include that in this graphic here for everyone. So when we get into the franchise context, there's a lot on my mind here with this team. There's a strange narrative, especially at the start of the year around the Washington Wizards. It felt like anytime I went on social media, people were bashing the Washington Wizards. And I know from the last couple of years, I was basically the only person on all of YouTube talking about the Wizards because they were the definition of mediocrity. Nobody cared about them. They weren't bad enough to get a top pick. They weren't good enough to really be a playoff team. And even if they did somehow find a way to sneak into the playoffs or the play-in, everybody knew they weren't going anywhere. They just weren't any good. Their team construct was bad. And then all of a sudden this year, they finally chose a direction. They're going to rebuild. They're going to tank to the bottom, get some good draft picks, and then hopefully build this thing out the way that most other teams in the league do. And then all of a sudden everyone was bashing on the Wizards. I just couldn't believe it. It didn't make any sense to me. I think the Wizards are being very smart. I think Ted Leonsis is doing a great job this season. Now, I know a lot of Wizards fans kind of had run out of patience for him, but listen, he's made a smart decision. He kind of is the reason that they're rebuilding. He made the decision to fire Tommy Shepard. He made the decision to hire Michael Winger, and then of course Will Dawkins comes in with that as well. So credit to him. A lot of owners are kind of out of touch, and as long as they're selling tickets, they're happy. But I think he clearly, looking at his ownership of the Washington Capitals, decided, I want better. I want to do better, and I want to win championships. And he knew the Wizards weren't in a position to do that. So their franchise context has drastically changed in the last 6 months. They're really bad right now. For the 2024 draft, that means maybe a shot at Alex Sarr or Nikola Topic, maybe Zachary Risa-Sher. There's a collection of players that I think could make this team quite a bit better moving forward. In fact, I have a mock draft up on the channel right now. It's the most recent video before this one, so go give that one a watch after this video, especially if you're a diehard Wizards fan. You're going to want to see who I have mocked to you in that mock draft. Outside of this year, I think the plan for them is to stay very, very bad for at least 2 more seasons, and that is specifically the 2025 draft and the 2026 draft. Through those 2 drafts, you're looking at maybe a chance at Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper, all 3 prospects who are really, really good young players. 2 of them are attending Rutgers, and of course Cooper Flagg is going to Duke, and he is the main event. He's from Maine, and honestly, I think he would love to play his NBA career in the Northeast of the United States of America. And hey, Washington might be that spot. You never know. I'm gonna leak it now. It's funny, back in the end of the 2022 draft cycle, I kind of talked about how I thought Wembanyama was going to be a Spur. I kind of leaked that. I felt like, hey, it just kind of makes sense, right? It seems like the way that it would work after the DeJounte Murray trade. And, well, here I am now saying Cooper Flagg to Washington. Watch out for that. But honestly, though, outside of 2025, maybe get into 2026, there's a bunch of other good prospects that are coming up, current, juniors in high school that I have my eyes on already. A lot of players that honestly I'm very intrigued by and I think could be great NBA players. So I think they're doing a great job. They're going to keep first-round picks. They're going to regain flexibility, add young talent, become better than mediocre. And it's not a hard bar to beat. They just have to be better than 34 wins a season. They're going to surpass that at some point. It's not going to be this year. It won't be 2025 or 2026. But going forward, just like any long-term rebuild, I think that they're going to take significant steps forward as time progresses. And Wizards fans, all you have to do is be patient. So what I want you to do right now, go comment down below in the comment section, Wizards fans, hold the patience. That's what I want to see down in the comment section. Lets me know you guys got the main message here, which is be patient, trust the front office, because I think Michael Winger and Will Dawkins are doing a fantastic job. Michael Winger, part of a really smart front office over in Los Angeles when he was with the Clippers. He orchestrated the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George moves, and you might say, oh, well, that didn't work out. Listen, anytime you're smart enough to put yourself in a position to land not 1 but 2 superstar players, it means you're a super smart, super savvy person in the NBA world. And Will Dawkins, part of a really great front office there in Oklahoma City, learning under Sam Presti for quite some time. I think those are the 2 guys I would want running my franchise. If I was a fan of the Washington Wizards, I would feel great right now, and I think Wizards fans should especially feel really good with the job that these two guys are doing, the long-term approach they're taking, the accumulation of assets, because they're taking a slow build-up to achieve their ultimate goal and achieve ultimate success of maybe winning an NBA Finals at some point, just like we saw with the Denver Nuggets. Drafting, developing, being patient. You make a timely trade like the Aaron Gordon trade, and all of a sudden you're cooking with gas. And I think the Wizards are a team that is lining up to be that, not anytime soon, but maybe in the next half decade, and that is really exciting if you're a Wizards fan. So when we look at their multi-year contract outlook, there's a lot of good. There's a little bit of kind of bad. I wouldn't necessarily say it's outright bad, but kind of not great. And then the ugly. Let's start with the ugly. Jordan Poole, 3 years left after this season. He's owed roughly $95 million over that course of time. And of course, he was a salary dump by the Golden State Warriors when they traded him to Washington. The Wizards did pretty well getting some draft assets, and they turned an expiring contract in Chris Paul into picks. And that's a pretty savvy move, especially, listen, remember what the plan is. Stay bad now, stay bad next year, stay bad the year after. Well, look, Jordan Poole helps you with that. He's not a winning player. He's not a very good player. And to be honest, this offseason, I kind of overlooked some of his flaws, even though I was super low on him on Golden State. Even if you go back to maybe last March, last April, I said the Warriors have a significant issue with Jordan Poole. This is well before the playoffs, and I said that they'd be better off not playing him, pulling him completely out of the rotation. So I'm not very high on Jordan Poole, but I did kind of expect him to be like a 24, 25, 26 point per game scorer in Washington. I said that in live streams this past offseason, and I think I overlooked some of his flaws even at a volume perspective, where I thought, hey, if he gets enough shots, he'll score that much. I think I overlooked some of those flaws as well, so that's on me. Then we get to the kind of bad, and it's Daniel Gafford. He's not a bad player, so you have to be careful here. We're talking about contracts, not the player. I think Daniel Gafford is a high-quality backup big man. The issue is Washington's playing him as a starting center, which is already flawed. You're not going to win a ton of games with Daniel Gafford and Jordan Poole being starters in your rotation, in my opinion, especially if you don't have premier talent around those two guys. So you're already kind of working behind the eight ball a bit. But then when you look at Gafford's contract, there's 2 years left after this season. He's making about $14 million a year in that stretch of time, which is just kind of a lot of money for a player that I value as a backup center. Looking across the league, a lot of other teams' backup centers cost anywhere from about $6 to $9 million. And an example of a $14 million a year backup big is Naz Reid, who's in the running for Sixth Man of the Year. I don't think Daniel Gafford is quite that level of player, not quite that level of talent, but he does some things really well. He's a shot blocker, he's a rim presence on the offensive end, on the weak side as a lob catcher. Gafford isn't a bad player. Again, we're talking solely about the contract here, but the very good is what really stands out to me. And part of it is something that, listen, Michael Winger and Will Dawkins, I said in the last graphic that they're doing a fantastic job. This is examples of it. Kyle Kuzma, descending contract, genius, absolutely genius, because he becomes more and more and more tradable as time progresses. And other teams, rival teams, are going to look at that contract and say, oh, this is perfect. We can fit this in our books because as this player's contract descends, Kuzma's contract descends and will open up more money to make other things work, which is just genius. There's 3 years left after this season. They have a vast amount of time to trade him. If they don't trade him this deadline, it's not a big deal. They can trade him in future years for sure, although it's very possible they do trade him. We'll talk about that later. He's owed roughly $66 million. Denny Avdia signed a 4-year extension. I couldn't believe this contract. Just an absolute home run. Descending contract as well. If you want to know how good it is, he makes less than $12 million in the year 2027, 2028. By then, the mid-level exception is likely going to be $15, $16, maybe $17 million a year. So you have a player who I think is pretty good, making about $4 or $5 million less than the mid-level exception is projected to be by then. That's an absolute home run contract for the Washington Wizards. I'm not sure why Avdia's agency allowed him to agree to that contract, but wow, what a deal for Michael Winger and Will Dawkins. Landry Shamet, 2 years left after this year. I actually tweeted about this again. Reminder, go follow us on Twitter, links in the description. One of the better contracts to trade for this trade deadline for a few reasons. First of all, there's $0 guaranteed next season. So if a team wanted to, maybe say a contender or team worried about their long-term cap picture, they could trade for Landry Shamet this year, maybe fit him in, and then outright waive him in the offseason, where you're almost looking at him as a 2-month rental, someone who's going to maybe help you make a playoff push, maybe help you in a playoff series. You don't really know, but he's a good shooter. shooting about 37.5% from three. He's actually posting a career high in field goal percentage this season in 22 games for the Wizards so far this year. And he has a team option in 25-26. So you might say, well, okay, for the teams that would maybe cut him, why does that team option matter? Because there's also teams that would have interest in him and keep him. He's only making about $11 million next season and a little bit over $11 million the year after that. So some team might look at that and say, well, that's pretty cheap. Maybe we can buy him now for relatively low, keep him in the building for quite some time, and he's not that expensive. He's retradable because other teams could essentially trade for him and look at him as an expiring contract again because of that team option. There's a ton of flexibility for a team in that deal, which is why it's super tradable and a really good contract, honestly, for the Wizards to theoretically get out of if they decide that they're getting enough value to trade him. Then we look at some of the expiring contracts, and they've got an interesting group of players here. Tyus Jones, 1 year, $14 million. We'll talk about what he could possibly net here in a second. DeLon Wright, 1 year is a little bit over $8 million. I like DeLon Wright as a player. I think he could help a bunch of contenders right now. One team specifically that I think could really use DeLon Wright is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Danilo Gallinari, 1 year, about $7 million. Gallo, I'm sure, would have some interest. Kind of a bigger name, has had a really nice NBA career. He's not the same player now as he used to be, obviously. He's aged quite a bit coming off an injury from last year. But he's given the Wizards some nice moments, and I think he could find a role somewhere, whether that's just a depth piece for a contending team. That's likely what I would see him as. But maybe, just maybe, a team would look at it and say, hey, he can still shoot the basketball. That's valuable enough for us to consider bringing him in. Mike Muscala, stretch big, 1 year, $3.5 million. I could definitely see a team trading for that contract to get another shooter in the building. And then Anthony Gill, 1 year, $2 million. If someone trades for Anthony Gill, I might lose my mind during the trade deadline live stream that we'll be doing closer to the trade deadline itself. So when it comes to what the trade value is, I have 5 players specifically I want to talk about the most. Let's start with Kyle Kuzma. I think you're going to get around 2 first-round picks of value plus salary. So what do I mean 2 first-round picks of value? It could be outright 2 first-round picks and salary match. Maybe something like Davis Bertans from the Oklahoma City Thunder plus some other whatever middling contract and 2 first-round picks. That's something I would consider. 2 first-round picks of value plus matching salary. Or it could be theoretically with a team that, let's say, the Toronto Raptors. I don't think this would be the actual team, of course. I don't think the Raptors are going to be going out and buying Kyle Kuzma right now, but this is just a theoretical example where maybe you get a first-round pick and Giddey Dick. Giddey Dick was just a lottery pick in last year's draft, so maybe you're looking at that as a first-round pick of value. I hope you guys understand what I mean by that. I don't want to spend too much more time on Kyle Kuzma. I think he could slightly help some contenders. I'm not as high on Kuzma as other people, but I do understand some of the intrigue. He's lengthy, rebounds the ball really well on the defensive end of the floor. I think at times when he's playing his best, he's a capable playmaker, and his decision-making's gotten better from when he was really young, but I still don't think it's great. Part of that comes down to who he's playing with as well there in Washington. When we do discuss decision makers, Tyus Jones is one of the better ones in the league. Always a very low very high assist to turnover ratio, a very low number of turnovers. I think you would net probably multiple second-round picks for him. It's hard for me to see a team giving up a first-round pick. If they did, it would probably be like some far-out pick swap, maybe like a 2029 first-round pick swap, where if I was the Wizards, I would accept that, to be honest, because the more pick swaps you can have far out, the better, because as the Wizards start to rebuild, get better, a lot of these guys, Bilal Coulibaly would be in his 7th year in the league at that point. You're hoping you're a good team, and the team that's trading for Tyus Jones right now, that's probably a contender, you're hoping that, hey, maybe they lose a guy or two, and then all of a sudden their team looks different, maybe they enter a rebuild, and all of a sudden we're getting this top pick from trading Tyus Jones half a decade ago. That's like a huge home run, in my opinion, if you're able to do that. Otherwise, getting more second round picks gives you, again, more trade flexibility. Maybe you get an unproven young player in there. For an example, again, not a team that I would see doing this, but if you're trading with, say, the San Antonio Spurs, maybe that means you get Blake Wesley in a deal, or maybe that means you get somebody like a Charles Bassey, who hasn't done a ton yet up to this point. I hope you guys understand kind of what I'm going for here. I don't have a ton of examples of unproven young players that I want to point out specifically for Tyus Jones trades, because it really comes down to who ultimately pulls the trigger on a Tyus Jones deal, I don't think it will be the Minnesota Timberwolves for him, just given the fact that he makes a little bit too much money. It would push them toward the luxury tax, and that's one of the most important things to consider when it comes to all of these deals. Landry Shamet, for him, I think it would be multiple second-round picks, probably 2 of them, and salary. I think the team to watch for is the Detroit Pistons. Monty Williams loved him in Phoenix. Troy Weaver was recently on the Woj pod with Adrian Wojnarowski and assured Woj essentially that they're looking at shooting. They want to bring more shooting into Detroit. Landry Shamet fits the bill for that at a relatively cheap price point. You can get him without having to trade a first-round pick. I think it makes sense for both sides. The Wizards get a second-round pick or 2. The Pistons get a guy who fits around Cade Cunningham, albeit not really a needle mover. Just gives you a shooter, which I don't love, but I don't hate for Detroit. DeLon Wright, probably a second-round pick and salary. You're looking at probably taking in a guy making anywhere from $8 to $10 million that has relatively negative value, maybe 1 or 2 years left on his contract after this season, so maybe you have to take in a little bit more long-term money if you're Washington, but you still get a second-round pick out of the deal, which is a pretty big win. And then Daniel Gafford, I ultimately do not see him getting traded, but if he did, I would say multiple second-round picks, but really, I just, again, don't see him getting traded, and part of the reason why it's only second-rounders is, again, I don't think that contract is a super positive, and for that reason specifically, I don't think a team trades for Daniel Gafford this trade deadline either. So when it comes to some potential buy low targets for the Washington Wizards, I think this is the most fascinating part of the video. Who could the Wizards theoretically bring in? I want to start with Josh Giddey, and I think it would come in a 3-team construction if, and this is a really big if, and this is an if that I don't think will happen, but if the Thunder make a big buy move, I'm talking about a trade for Lauri Markkanen, I'm talking about a trade for some other all-star-y type of forward, someone who's a 6'8" to 7' big man, someone who's a 6'8" to 6'10" wing. You're looking at kind of addressing their power forward spot, essentially. And if Oklahoma City makes some big move like that, you would have to assume Josh Giddey's the one going out the door. And in return, because of that, with Josh Giddey going out, maybe the team trading the all-star-ish player, like the Jazz trading Lauri Markkanen, for example, again, not that I think it will happen, but theoretically, Josh Giddey, maybe the Jazz don't have as much interest as Josh Giddey, so maybe the Wizards are able to swoop in, add in a little bit of extra value themselves. Maybe they can offer up a player that the Jazz like, whether that be, whatever it may be, some buy now player, whatever it is, okay? This is just, again, a hypothetical here. Maybe you can get Josh Giddey in the door by giving up a vast collection of your second rounders. Maybe you throw 3-4 second round picks to get Josh Giddey. Maybe you throw a protected first rounder out the door. There's some ways I think that the Wizards could get involved in a deal for Josh Giddey. Jaden Ivey, again, I really think not likely, but you never really know with Troy Weaver. He's made a lot of questionable decisions in his time as the GM for the Detroit Pistons. I think Jaden Ivey was one of his better decisions when he drafted him 5th overall, but I can't really predict what Troy Weaver's going to do on a night-to-night basis as a decision maker, so that's kind of tough. Andrew Wiggins, another guy who I think could get looped into Washington in a 3-team deal construct where maybe the Warriors make a buy move for a guy like Pascal Siakam. Maybe you see Wiggins go to Washington, picks go to Toronto, Siakam goes to the Warriors. And in this situation, it's mostly the fact that the Warriors don't want Wiggins anymore and the Raptors wouldn't have interest in Wiggins. I do think that the Raptors would theoretically be interested in Wiggins. So again, it's kind of whatever, but maybe Kuzma gets swapped with Wiggins somewhere. There's ways that theoretically, like if you're looking at possibilities, maybe there's a 3-team package where the team that would be getting Wiggins from Golden State says we don't want Wiggins, but maybe they want Kyle Kuzma instead. So maybe Wiggins and picks come to Washington, Kuzma goes to the 3rd team, and Siakam or whatever other player going to Golden State ends up with the Warriors. Just a possibility. Now here's some cheaper options that I think the Wizards would consider. Amir Coffey's on this list. Obviously, Michael Winger knows him pretty well from his time with the Clippers. Coffey's really developed his game since coming into the NBA, played for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, could not shoot a lick when he was playing in college, was more of a point forward who could handle and get inside, finish at the rim. He was a slashing archetype player. Now, after multiple years in the G League and really working on his craft, he's actually a really, really good shooter, which is just insane. So a lot of credit to Amir Coffey. I actually think with his contract, he's one of the better value players around the league. I think, honestly, 95% of NBA fans probably don't even know who this guy is. And I honestly think he's like an impactful winning player that could fit in a bunch of different lineups because he's lengthy, has size, has experience handling the basketball, but he's also now good catching and shooting. So because of that, I think there's a real role for him, and I think Washington would be an awesome spot for him to land to really give him an opportunity to showcase himself a bit more. Killian Hayes, I mean, Wizards, please don't do it. I just don't think they will actually do it. Killian Hayes is bad at basketball. Don't waste your time. Bull's also not bad at basketball, but he's actually fun to watch because he's like 7'3" and moves around like I don't know. He just moves in awesome ways. He blocks 3-point shots. He does fun things. So Bull's not good. Killian Hayes is not good, but Killian Hayes is also not fun to watch. Bull's fun to watch. So if you're trying to sell a couple more tickets, get Wizards fans hyped up a little bit more, let's get Bull to Washington. You know, whatever it is, dump some other player that we don't care about. For Bull, the Suns will probably say yes because they don't even play him anyway. It's a huge win for the Wizards. Let's get some fun players in Washington. That's all I care about right now. And for my final predictions, I think it's going to be a busy deadline for the Washington Wizards. I think Tyus for sure gets traded. I think Shamet for sure gets traded. I would think DeLon Wright probably gets traded. That's like a 50-50 for me. And I think Kyle Kuzma is a real 50-50 chance as well. And around Kyle Kuzma, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Will Pascal Siakam get traded, and when? And I think the answer to that first question, will he? Yes. When will he? We don't know. And I think teams are going to be hesitant trading for a guy like Kuzma while Siakam is still hypothetically available. So that kind of changes what his market looks like as well. And if the Raptors really slow play this, which maybe they won't, maybe they will, it kind of hinders what Washington can do around Kuzma and maybe gives them a little bit of a shorter time period to get a trade done for him. And then also when it comes down to it for Washington, there's not a rush. His contract, again, is descending. He becomes more and more tradable every year you wait because his contract's slightly cheaper. The cap will grow and go up a bit. Teams will have more interest in getting a cheaper contract each year. So Kuzma, I mean, even though right now there's a lot of team control on a descending deal, teams next year will be just as excited to trade for him as they are right now. So again, Washington's not really in a situation where they have to panic and trade him if they don't love the offers they're getting, and I honestly suggest that maybe they hold on to him if they're not getting what they deem fair value, which is pretty different than most rebuilding teams. I usually am very much in the belief of, hey, if you're tanking, retooling, rebuilding, you got to trade guys. But the Wizards right now, they're bad enough to be toward the top of the draft regardless. They're going to have plenty of lottery balls this year. So trading Kuzma this year is not a high priority if they're not getting the right offers for him. And if they do trade him, it means they got a pretty good offer and one that I'd probably defend. Because again, I'm not super high on Kuzma myself. Make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe for more content. I really had a lot of fun talking about the Washington Wizards in this trade guide. If there was any questions you had that I did not answer, go comment down below. Let me know what you want to know, and I'll comment back and I'll reply and let you know if I missed to include anything, and I'll answer any and all questions down in the comment section. Also, let me know down in the comment section below what video you want to see next. Which trade guide should I do next? I'm sure a lot of people want to see Detroit Pistons and a few other teams as well. So let me know down in the comment section. Thanks again so much, guys, for watching. Really do appreciate you. Go give us follows over on those socials, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.